Ready when you are.
Perfect. So good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Municipal Services Committee of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. I'll ask staff to now call the roll.
Trustee Kennedy?
Here.
Trustee Kurzman?
Here.
Trustee Sullivan?
Here. So this meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under a stay-at-home order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, all in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the Open Meetings Act now permits electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the Municipal Services Committee, and this evening we're conducting our business in compliance with the state law. This meeting is being broadcast live on our local cable access channel 6. It is also being broadcast on the internet on YouTube Live, and the URL for that is youtube.com/user/village-of-wilmette/live. If you'd like to participate in the meeting, you may use the Microsoft Teams app on any device for free. No sign-in is required. The link to join our meeting is posted on the website calendar at wilmette.com/calendar. The meeting will be archived on the village's website as we do with all of our other televised public meetings. A remote meeting requires a different mechanic for public participation. To ensure that our residents, business owners, and other interested parties have the opportunity to participate in this meeting, we have solicited public comment prior to the start of the meeting via email. If you send an email to publiccomment@wilmette.com prior to the start of the meeting, our staff will read the email during the public comment portion of our agenda. If members of the public who are watching the broadcast would like to participate during our designated public comment periods, you may submit your comments through YouTube Live at the appropriate time, and a member of the village staff will read your comment to the Municipal Services Committee. All comments to the Municipal Services Committee will be recorded in the meeting minutes as we typically do. Everyone will have joined the meeting today will be muted. When it is time for public comments, those joining us through Teams can toggle their mute status by clicking on the microphone icon on the meeting toolbar. Those joining us by audio conference dial-in can toggle their mute status by pressing *6. Only attendees can unmute themselves. No one can unmute one another. And just a reminder that a public comment can also be provided by emailing publiccomment@wilmette.com or through the Village's YouTube live stream. Before the meeting, the Municipal Services Committee receives a packet of agenda materials. These materials are also posted on wilmette.com so that residents and other interested parties can review the very same materials that the Municipal Services Committee received. The meeting packet contains the agenda, minutes of the last Municipal Services Committee meeting, 2 agenda items, and a public comment. Now I'm going to move on to the agenda. We got to get through COVID, so we stopped reading that. The first item is one call to order. The second is agenda item is the approval of the minutes from our September 29, 2020 meeting of the Municipal Services Committee. Are there any comments, questions, updates on the minutes? And yep, Trustee Kurzman.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Sullivan. I'm looking at 5 of the packet and some, I guess it would be the 3rd paragraph. I'm not the most artful speaker, but I just don't think like that reflected what I said. What I would hope could be taken into consideration or perhaps reviewed, because I don't know if we can make that change here and now, but I believe that I expressed surprise that the plan contained a tunnel that I expected a flyover. I think I even expressed some preference for the flyover, but none of that is recorded here in the minutes. So I guess I want to address that somehow. I don't know what's the process, but I didn't think this represented how I spoke on that here.
I have a couple thoughts, but Bridget, looks like you do too. So I'll ask you your thoughts. And
yeah, I apologize. You cut out when you said, which page is this on?
Page 5 of the packet.
Page 4 of the minutes, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Third paragraph.
So we can go ahead and review the minutes or the tape of the minutes and propose some new language if you would like, and then bring it to the committee at the next meeting for approval.
Yeah, I would hate to take any additional time with that. If that's okay with my colleagues, that would be totally fine by me.
No, that's what I was gonna say, is why don't we just pull the minutes and save it for our next municipal services meeting, which I don't think we have one scheduled, but I thought we talked about having one in January anyway, so. And then we can get this resolved so the minutes reflect appropriately. Trustee Kurzman, how you want them reflected.
I agree.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that
Absolutely.
from my colleagues and staff.
Okay. All right, so we're going to table number 2. So that's going to move us to agenda item number 3, which is the Skokie Lake project overview and approval of the multi-use path alignment. So I'm turning that over to you, Dan.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Perfect.
Good evening, Chair Sullivan, members of the committee. We're here tonight to discuss the Skokie Boulevard and Lake Avenue improvement project. This project is currently in the preliminary engineering study phase. This is also referred to as Phase 1 engineering or Phase 1 study. In 2019, the village hired a civil engineering consultant to complete the Phase 1 study work, and work began collecting existing conditions data, evaluating that data, and developing project alternatives. The intent of this meeting is to update the committee on the status of the project, review project details, and seek support on project alternatives. Joining us tonight is to present on this topic is a representative of Civil Tech Engineering. They're the consulting firm hired by the village to complete the preliminary engineering study. So with that said, I'll now welcome Joel Christel to the floor, and he will run through the presentation.
Thank you, Dan, and the committee. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me and see the first slide on the screen here.
I can.
Yep, I can as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. So as Dan said, here's our agenda for tonight. I will try to make this not a 3-hour discussion as someone else just had a 3-hour meeting, but we'll try to get through the pertinent information and then leave some time for questions, any questions that the committee has. So the agenda is going to be discussing the project purpose and need, which are essentially the goals of the project. Talk about the roadway jurisdiction within our project limits, as well as the funding for the project. Talk about our public engagement that we've held to date, as well as any future public touches that we will have. Traffic analysis, this is specifically for the potential landscaped and pedestrian refuge islands or medians. We'll summarize the proposed intersection improvements and then go through and show or present the multi-use path alternatives as well as the impacts. Go through the project schedule, and then the action requested, as they've said, is the approval of the alignment for the Skokie Boulevard multi-use path. So as you guys may know, the Wilmette Master Bike and Active Transportation Plan has been going on. I think it's at the very last stages. There's been some public feedback that identified the Skokie Boulevard and Lake Avenue intersection as an area to improve pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. And something that we looked at early on in the project was to looked at other studies, looked at existing conditions, some of the data that we collected, and come up with a project purpose and need. And so that purpose and need is to improve safety and mobility for all users, improve the roadway surface, look at traffic signal improvements, as well as landscape enhancements. Let me get the pointer here so I can kind of, kind of a unique situation, our project area. North is to the right. This is the Edens Expressway. Lake Avenue is here, and this is Skokie Boulevard. Lake Avenue and Illinois Road are under the maintenance and jurisdiction of Cook County, and Skokie Boulevard is under the maintenance and jurisdiction of IDOT. So the village, when the phase 1 study started, entered into an intergovernmental agreement for Cook County and IDOT to fund, I think, most of the phase 1, if not all of the phase 1 study. The intersection improvements here, which is kind of how this project started. The village secured Surface Transportation Program, or STP, funding for phase 2 design engineering, construction, and construction engineering. And then as the project progressed, there was maybe a need for adding pedestrian and bicycle accommodations along Skokie Boulevard. So the village submitted an Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program application, and we're expecting results in the spring of next year. The multi-use path, just to take a step back, the intersection improvements, this would be the intersection improvements here, so that would be funded. And then we're seeking funding for the multi-use path. So what engagement have we had to date? Well, we held a public information meeting during the middle of the pandemic. We did it outside of the Public Works building. It was actually great to get outside a little bit. We were socially distanced. We had a pretty decent turnout, I think, for a project like this. So our purposes of that meeting were to introduce the project to the public, obtain feedback on the intersection improvement, as well as the multi-use path alternatives, which we'll discuss in a little bit here. We're anticipating a public information another one in the spring of 2021, probably late spring. And what we'll do there is present the preferred alternative impacts, some of the same things that you will see tonight. I'm not going to take a lot of time on this slide. This is just to show the limits of our study area or the improvement. You can see the black line here is our improvement limits. You'll see that I'll mention in a minute some improvements that have already happened in 2020. But this also shows where the signalized intersections are at Lake Avenue and the Edens Plaza signal, Lake Avenue and Skokie, and then at Lake Avenue and the Edens Plaza signal as well. So we performed traffic analyses to determine whether landscape medians and pedestrian refuge islands would be feasible. This would require the medians to be widened from 4 feet up to 10 feet. This allows pedestrians to stop within the median if they don't have time to cross the entire width of the roadway. However, IDOT and medians with IDOT, since they do own Skokie, they would require that left turn movements or vehicles waiting to turn left, that movement to be protected only. And so what that means is that if you're at the intersection waiting to turn left, you would have to turn left on an arrow only. There wouldn't be a green ball to turn left, which is called a permitted left turn phase. And so what that would typically do is the queues and vehicle delay would go up. And so what we try to do is balance the safety that we're trying to achieve with, the vehicle delay and queues. And we try to balance that as much as we can. Unfortunately for this project, the results were unacceptable for vehicle delay and queues. So because of that, we are dropping from further consideration landscape medians and pedestrian refuge islands from further study. So although we are not providing landscape medians and pedestrian refuge islands, we can provide better safety for pedestrians at this intersection. And that's one of the goals, as we mentioned before, was to increase safety and operation for all users. So I'll just run through a quick, some of the features of the intersection improvement. One is to reduce the northeast, the southwest, as well a little bit of the northwest corner radii. Also to remove, if you've seen out there, there's these islands. We'll remove those islands that are in the northwest and southeast corners. And then if you've ever driven on the Edens and exited at Lake Street or Lake Avenue, you can notice that eastbound outside curb lane is pretty wide. And so it provides some confusion for vehicles. It's not really needed. And so by reducing that to a typical 11 or 12 foot width, you can provide some better space for pedestrians so they feel safer on the south side. It also helps with reducing the corner radii. And what that does is it will reduce the crossing distances for pedestrians. which is one of, the biggest things, at a large intersection, how can we get the pedestrians across safely? Each of these crossings or the ramps would be ADA compliant. We replaced the traffic signal to modernize it. Lake Avenue would be resurfaced. And then if you've noticed that IDOT did a resurfacing of Skokie Boulevard earlier this year. So we would not need to do any major improvements along Skokie Boulevard, which is good. This is just to provide some context for as we look into the alternatives, the shared use path or the multi-use path and sidewalk alternatives along the north leg of Skokie Boulevard. This is looking northeast at Chalet. You can see some of the landscaping here. It's pretty close to the roadway. It looks very nice, obviously. The top right photo is just a little bit farther north along the east side of Skokie. There's some more nice landscaping, a couple trees, and it's fairly close to the roadway there as well. Looking at a photo on the west side of Skokie Boulevard, this is looking north, just south of the Edens Plaza signal. There's a little bit more room, but there is some landscaping and trees within the parkway. And then this photo here in the bottom right is the east side of Skokie, just south of Illinois Road. You'll see it doesn't look very nice, but as part of the IDOT improvement, IDOT removed quite a number of trees along that side or that part of Skokie Boulevard. So what the project team did was we developed 2 multi-use path alternatives and 2 sidewalk alternatives to provide pedestrian and bicycle accommodations along the north leg of Skokie. Each alternative varies in function, width, and location. And then we determined, high-level impacts, including trees, tree removal, permanent right-of-way acquisition, as well as temporary construction easements, as well as landscaping impacts. Each alternative includes the replacement of the existing traffic signal at Edens Plaza as well. So alternative 1 is an 8-foot multi-use path that starts north is to the right. So north is looking up. This is Skokie Boulevard. This is Lake Avenue. The Edens Plaza is over here, and then the Chalet landscaping and garden center is over here. So the alternative 1 starts at Lake Avenue, continues along the west side up to the Edens Plaza signal, crosses over to the east side, and then up to Illinois Road, and then a connection to Sprucewood Lane. You'll notice that there's a pattern here with some of these alternatives that we'll get to in a second. I'll just quickly go through some of the impacts for this alternative. There will be 27 trees removed. You can see that there's about 16,000 square foot of permanent right-of-way, some temporary easements at 8,000 square feet, and then existing landscaping impacts at 5,700 square feet. And so one of the reasons we wanted to look at the existing landscaping impacts is because of some of the landscaping that's within the corridor is within the existing right-of-way. So even though we do want to look at how much right-of-way we're taking, we wanted to quantify how much existing landscaping would be impacted by these alternatives. Alternative 2 consists of an 8-foot multi-use path. This would be located entirely along the east side of Skokie Boulevard, up to Illinois Road again, and up over to Sprucewood Lane. The tree removal is 28 trees. There would be no permanent right-of-way or permanent easements, just over 4,000 square feet of temporary easements, and then just under 6,000 square feet of landscaping impacts. You'll notice here's where the patterns kind of start. This is a 5-foot, alternative 3 is a 5-foot sidewalk. The alignment is the same as alternative 1, starting at Lake Avenue along the west side up to the Edens Plaza signal, and then up along the east side to Illinois Road and over to Sprucewood. As anticipated with a narrower cross section of improvement with the 5-foot sidewalk, there's less impacts. There's 18 trees would be removed. Permanent right-of-way would be about 2,300 square feet. Temporary easements 5,300 square feet, and existing landscaping impacts at 1,300 square feet.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And hope I didn't get you off your roll. You were doing great there. Between 1 and 3, where we have 5 or 8 foot, can you help me understand the proximity of each of those to the street? Is the extra 3 feet on the street side or on the or sort of on the inside towards the to the west?
Yeah, so with a shared use path or a multi-use path, what we have to do is we have to be at least 5 feet from the face of curb. So we would be at least 5 feet, and you can kind of see here. I can maybe bring up a better. Like here. So you can see that, depending on where we are, we kind of move the alignment to maybe save some trees. There's some utilities out there. If there's ever going to be, I can't remember if there's existing lighting. We want to try to make sure there's room for lighting. So we tried to kind of not wind it around, but try to, move it so that we could reduce the number of trees or landscaping impacts, those types of things. So if we go to, that's the east side. The east side is a lot tighter as far as the right-of-way goes, or at least the parkway. The right-of-way on the east side is really at the chalet parking lot, but on the west side, it's kind of in the middle of the parkway. So there's not a lot of room on this east side to move it around. It's pretty much, it has to be about 5 feet from the face, and then maybe a little bit more, and then there's not really much room to move it around. If we go north, we tried to stay as there's quite a few trees here as well. IDOT took quite a bit of those trees away, but we tried to keep it as close to the roadway as possible in order to try to remain or leave some of those impacts to the trees. That's something that was kind of brought up. So the sidewalk is generally about 5 feet from the edge of the roadway. 2 reasons. The right-of-way is pretty narrow here, so we tried to eliminate as much of the proposed right-of-way as possible. And then, again, as you saw from maybe the photo, there is a little bit of room to fit a sidewalk before you have to take, a bunch of trees and landscaping. And the same thing here at this northern part. This is an IDOT roadway. One other thing to mention is there's an existing swale or ditch along this side. So we tried to get the sidewalk as close to the roadway as possible in order to keep that swale in place, because IDOT's likely going to require that swale to remain as we move forward. So that's kind of a long-winded answer. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
mostly, I guess what I'm trying to determine is whether the 5 foot or the 8 foot puts the user any closer to the road traffic, than other alternatives. If it's a standard that there's 5 feet between the road and where the path is, then that helps to know that that's standard. But it sounds like the further north you go after the stoplight it sounds like it gets pretty tight to the roadway.
Yeah, so south of the signal, it's pretty tight. I mean, tight in we're still meeting the required distances. People would still, some people would feel it's typical for what we would do for a sidewalk or a shared use path. We're about 8 feet here away, and the minimum is 5. We get up here, it's a little bit tighter because we were trying to reduce the number of tree impacts to the residents here on, kind of the northern portion. So we tried to keep it as close to the roadway as possible.
Okay. No, this is helpful. Thank you. And again, I hope I didn't interrupt too badly there.
No, that's okay. It's part of my job to go roll with the punches, right? So, let's see. Let's get back to
Hey, Joel, can I ask one question? I mean, since we jumped into questions, but
Sure.
why so on the both examples, alternative 1 and 3, where the path is on the west side by Eden's Plaza there, then we have it crossing over. Why do you have it crossing over on the north end of that stoplight versus the south end? And the reason I'm asking that is, is there any concern with people whipping off that exit on the southbound exit ramp from Eden's and just blowing through that light? And is it better to have people crossing on the north end in hopes that people stop? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do. So when you see here, one of the reasons was this driveway.
Yep.
Here. So if we have them cross here at a signal, there's a signal here, it's probably could go either way, but we felt that it was better to have them cross here for whatever reason than having to cross another driveway. Here, let me go back to here. And then it provides, if we have them cross here, we're still going to need to do some ADA improvements, on each of the corners. But we felt that there was a little bit more room on this side to be able to put in, this this path, because the crosswalks are a little bit wider than a sidewalk.
Do you know, I mean, and maybe Bridget and Dan know, I mean, have there been any incidents where people getting off the highway don't realize that they have to come to a pretty quick stop?
I'm not aware of any.
I'm not either, but Joel, we did do an accident study, I believe here, correct?
Yeah, let me, got some of my exhibits here. Let me get those out. I don't recall that there was a big issue there with crashes. Every time I would come into the village, I would take either route, go Lake to see how that operates, or go to Skokie, and you are coming off that ramp pretty good. But looking at the collision data that we have, there weren't any crashes that due to that. The crashes were from the left turns. And there was 2 crashes, which, in the grand scheme of things is not really a lot of crashes there. It was the northbound left turns, obviously, so.
Hi, Joel. This is Jim Tibble at Civil Tech. I want to jump in and add one thing. There's a pedestrian sidewalk going into Eden's Plaza on the northwest corner too, which is why we have the crosswalk on the north side.
Got it. Okay.
See, that's why we bring a teammate, just in case, there's someone remembers something that I didn't. Okay. Let me get back. Okay, we were at. I think we were at alternative 4. This is generally the same. It is the same alignment as alternative 2. It's just a sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalk along the east side, entirely the east side. Impacts are 14 trees, no permanent right-of-way, some temporary easements, and landscaping impacts. This slide kind of shows a summary of the impacts. As anticipated, there are more impacts for the multi-use path. It's a wider width, but the multi-use path provides accommodations for both pedestrians and bicyclists, which has been noted in the active bike and transportation plan. We've seen that as part of our first public meeting. One of the things that we did was we were going to have people put stickers, but because of the pandemic, we did it ourselves. But people, the attendees at the meeting, we asked them which alternative do you like best. It wasn't a vote, but we wanted to get their feedback on which one they liked, and overwhelmingly Alternative 1 had the most, I guess, stickers on the, or selections. Just a couple other notes, looking at the alignments, which side, if we felt that providing it along a portion of it along the west side up to Eden's Plaza Signal and crossing over provides a little bit better connectivity for the residents, kind of east along Illinois Road and in that part of the village. They can cross, they can get to Eden's Plaza, they can go south. We felt that there are some connections to the west that they wanted to get to. Currently they can't really get over there unless they go down. I can't remember if it's Hibbard, down and around the lake. So felt that was a pretty good connection that way. The east side, there's more driveways. I mean, there's not a lot, but there are more driveways on the east side. The chalet has a couple entrances. I imagine that gets, well, maybe not right now, but it does get pretty busy with people coming in and out of that driveway. And so, one of the concerns with either a sidewalk or a shared use path or multi-use path is, the number of driveways along the roadway, because that's where conflict points that you have to kind of worry about. So that's it for the alternatives. And so where we're at in the study, just to give you a quick overview, and then we'll kind of open it up again. We are here, we're developing the alternatives. We had a public meeting, in July. Once this is selected, we will continue to refine the design and obtain all the approvals, the design approvals, approvals on the design, as well as the environmental approvals that are required for federal aid projects. We'll present these to the public, present the preferred alternative to the public sometime in the spring, and then shortly after get design approval, which is when phase 1 is completed. The next stage or phase is phase 2, which is preparation of the contract plans. This also includes acquisition of any right-of-way or easements that is anticipated in 21 to go into 22, and then construction in 22, 23, depending upon right-of-way and just one quick note. The intersection improvement is funded right now. We're anticipating and hoping that we get funding through ITEP, like I mentioned before. And the hope would be that these could be constructed, kind of at the same time. So with that, that's it.
Joel, I'm just going to add one quick note on funding. We've had several federal projects, and we're aware there's usually a 70-30 split, 70% federal, 30% local. In this case, it is a 70% local, or I'm sorry, 70% federal share, and then the local share will be split between IDOT and Cook County. So it's a really nice project for the village. Our only cost participation will be on things that are considered local only items, like the preemption on the traffic signals for the fire department, possibly some lighting, and then any beautification that we include in the project.
So Bridget, does that mean that if we have to acquire easements, that we will not have to bear 100% of that cost?
Joel, jump in on that. I believe that would be part of the phase 2 negotiation with Cook County and the state, that we would encourage their participation in that, those easements.
I would always.
Yeah, that's it, not to. It can kind of get messy if you're going through IDOT or that type of thing. But yeah, it's that first part of the phase 2 negotiation to see what would be in that intergovernmental agreement, and you would hope that it's their roadway. They would provide some of that. It's Cook County and IDOT roadways that they would provide some of that. The only thing I could see is that anytime there's a sidewalk or a shared use path or a multi-use path constructed, IDOT typically doesn't build those or fund those. So it might get a little tricky with that, but I think the goal would be for IDOT and Cook County to participate, hopefully fully in that. And we'll see.
And as part of the ITEP application, we did apply for funds for the easements and land acquisition.
Okay, and I take it when it says none, that's because we already have an easement that we can utilize without having to condemn land or negotiate with the landowner? When you're talking, some of the alternatives say there is, like, alternative 2 says no permanent right-of-way easement. There must be an easement. So the question is, I'm assuming none means that we already have it.
Yeah, so go
ahead.
ahead.
No, it fits within the existing right-of-way. So
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
no additional easement.
So it's only really alternative 1 and alternative 3 where we would have to go out and pay extra money, or somebody's gonna have to go out and pay extra money to get the easements. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, and I think if I didn't mention it, there, the west side, the existing right of way is kind of right in the middle of the parkway. So, you know,
Yeah.
there would be more easements, but on the east side, there's really not a lot of room. So any of that landscaping, you know, is going to be gone, and there's really no room to put any of that back on the east side, between Lake and the Edens Plaza signal. On the west side, if, you know, as part of the ITEP application or grant, we can do some landscaping enhancements as part of this project. And so we felt also on the west side that there's more room to provide, you know, some trees, or, you know, the landscaping that we're, you know, impacting, we could put something back. And that's part of kind of the next steps. If one of those alignments is selected, that we would provide a plan of how we could beautify that part of it, as well as the part north of, you know, on the east side, north of the Edens Plaza signal. You know, can we fit something in? Can we meet the drainage requirements? But can we add some more trees or any other type of, you know, beautification in that area?
Got it. Thanks. And do we have any sense of how amenable that the current property owners are to giving us an easement? Would we expect to have litigation, or are they just willing to go along with this? Or do we know?
I can try to answer that one. Past discussions with the property owner on the east side of Skokie Boulevard, they've expressed strong support for alternatives 1 and 3, which would put the path on the other side of the road. So the Edens Plaza representatives do not
Well played there, Dan.
And
that's not a surprise.
and the Edens Plaza representatives are aware of the project. They've been informed of the project details, and but they haven't expressed support for any of the alternatives in writing yet. But I think they recognize that this project could improve access to their plaza. So they like the project overall based on discussions I've had with them in the past, but they just had questions about whether any impacted landscaping would be replaced. And I informed them that it would, and we would look at enhancements along their property of any of the landscape features that are impacted.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
And IDOT follows a very methodical approach to these projects, and land acquisition is something that typically happens during the phase 2, so the next stage. So while we have perhaps just put that out there for their consideration, no formal negotiation or process has started related to land ac.
I'm just trying to figure out what kind of obstacles we might face going forward and what costs we would have to take into consideration. One last question. I know this must be impossible to answer, but I'm gonna ask the question anyway. Do we have any idea who would be using the path? Is it mostly going to be pedestrians? Do we expect bicycles to use it? Because I think that would make a difference in whether we want a 5-foot or an 8-foot. Do we have any sense of what the traffic on those paths would be like?
Well, with
Bridget,
my work,
go ahead.
Well,
you're the professional view, and I think that's what Trustee Kennedy was seeking. So I gladly yield for now. I just have a few thoughts afterwards.
Sure. I think what's important to look at here is this is one piece to building out a network on the west side. Right. And eventually, Trustee Kennedy, the goal is to get a connection over to Marie Murphy School and then all the way over to Avoca West. And yeah, and Loyola. So in isolation, may not appear that this will be widely used, but as part of this very important Lake Avenue, Skokie Boulevard corridor, it's a really key connection to connect that neighborhood, the Sprucewood neighborhood, to the west.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I wasn't being clear. I meant the mix of bicycles and pedestrians, not, I understand that it's going to be useful and that people are going to use it. I just wonder, are they predominantly pedestrians or are they predominantly bicyclists? I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about that. Do we have any sense?
Boy, I think that's a little bit hard to
Yeah,
say. I'm not sure how to answer that.
I suspect I wouldn't have a guess. But it seems to my observation of sidewalks in the village is that regardless of whether they're 5 feet wide or 8 feet wide, if the street is dangerous to ride a bicycle on, bicycles use the sidewalk.
Right.
And so I mean, if that's the case, and we do think there's going to be substantial bicycle traffic, that kind of seems to me to limit us to 2 alternatives, the 8-foot alternatives. Because it's really not that safe to have 5-foot sidewalks with bicycles and pedestrians, frankly. Thanks.
All right, so Dan, I guess for the trustees, any other specific questions, or Dan, Joel, anything else further on this? Because what I thought I see a few people have their hands up, but then I'd open it up for comment. So whether we want to ask some questions now or just hear the comments and then circle back for the trustees, or anything else we're missing.
I think we've covered everything we wanted to present, so opening up to public comments, probably next step.
Okay, Trustee Kennedy, Trustee Kurzman, you okay with that?
Fine with that.
Yes.
Sounds good. All right, so I do see a couple hands up, but now I'm going to open it up for public comment. I see you guys, everybody can help me out, but I think I just see one hand, Richard Moy. I apologize if I'm butchering the name.
No, it's correct.
Bridget, Dan, I know I read the instructions, but are we okay for Mr. Moy to just ask his question, or are there other comments that we got from online or anything else?
We can start with Mr. Moy and then circle back to any other comments.
Perfect. So Mr. Moy, welcome to the meeting, and the floor is yours for any questions.
Yes, I have a couple comments and then a couple questions. I myself is a bicyclist, so I cycle multiple Met and everything. So I understand what your thoughts are for putting that path in there, but the traffic pattern in that road is extremely dangerous for cyclists, even if you put a path there, because the velocity of what cars go through in that intersection, especially around Illinois, they're hitting 65 miles an hour even before they get to Illinois. And that is kind of dangerous, even if you have people who are on the sidewalk there. They could easily make a sudden turn, and then someone on the sidewalk is going to be impacted. So my first question is whether you guys had done some studies in terms of the velocity those cars are going through.
Joel?
All right. Yeah, I was going to say, Joel, do you want to address that one with the traffic study and I guess speed?
Yeah, so you know, if you're talking about you know, one of the things that we look at is the right turn radii, and you know how fast, you know, the larger the radii, the faster the vehicles can get through the intersection. And so that was one of the reasons why at Lake Avenue and Skokie that we one, it reduces the crossing distances, but it also, you know, I mean, still people can go fast, but we still, you know, it would slow the cars down around the corners. I don't recall what the radii was at Illinois, but a specific study as far as how fast they go, but based on the corner radii at a typical intersection like that, we could look at reducing that corner radii as well. But as far as speed studies, we did not do any speed studies along here, but we did try to reduce the radii as much as we could in order to, really slow people down a little bit around the corners.
Are you planning to do any type of barrier between the street and the sidewalk?
At Illinois?
And no, on Skokie.
Yeah, there's a curb there. That's I know that's it's standard to have a curb there. If there's a barrier in between, it gets kind of tricky if it's not required roadway, so it has to meet their standards for any barriers and things like that. We would typically put a barrier if the sidewalk or the path, the shared use path, really would be within that 5 feet that I talked about earlier. If we can't meet that 5 feet from the face of curb, then we would look at putting in a barrier or something like that to protect the shared use path or the users of the path. We don't, it's a concern, but we don't typically see, crashes, with cars running off the road. But, it's something that, that's inherent with, people that are concerned about it. So.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is I myself, who drive that road all the time, have many situations where when the two lane merges, people are trying to rush and sneak between each other and make close calls. And if someone slips, and they'll go right into the path.
Well, that's part of the reason that we try to keep it as at least 5 feet. There's that's FHWA and IDOT. It's widely recommended and a standard for those reasons. We try to keep it at least 5 feet from the face of curb, and so that's kind of what we typically do.
Because I just compared to Lake Avenue that's in Glenview, that they do have a barrier. My concern, that's my concern when it comes to design of that. My other question is, are you, since IDOT removed all the trees, and my house faces the Skokie Boulevard, now we have a lot of people trying to climb the fence. People are already walking on that ditch area, and they're throwing stuff into my house. And then we already had a few instances where people actually climb over the fence, and with drugs and everything. There's another instance that happened a couple of years ago. So now this situation has made the situation worse. And are you planning to have some form of additional barrier to prevent that from happening?
Bridget, do you want to talk about the landscaping, or is that a takeaway?
Well, we're not talking about any type of barrier other than a vegetative barrier that would consist of supplemental trees and arborvitae. I think because you have limited space, you're looking at things that are narrow and tall. I believe Mr. Moy or his neighbors have traded some emails, and this isn't an area that would be appropriate for like a IDOT sound wall that you would see along an expressway. So I think our type of barrier that we're looking at is really trying to put in some landscaping that'll give you some screening all year round.
So is you talking about, like, how tall are you talking about?
Well, I know an arborvitae can grow to 15 feet tall.
Mm-hmm. They can, but the question is, how tall would they start? That's my question.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line. You don't want to plant them too mature, or their survivability goes way down. So we'd work with our arborists and try and plant something that would be fast growing, but still give you some immediate relief and have a long good chance of survivability down the road.
Because they're going to keep the ditch there. That's my question. Next question: if they're going to keep the ditch there, then that's the one concern I have is whether they survive there or not. So,
Yeah, that ditch would most likely be enclosed with a storm sewer and enclosed drainage system to help manage the stormwater.
Because so it will be covered over?
More than likely, and Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that gives us more flexibility in how we can grade it with the multi-use path and then to provide some landscaping behind it.
Yeah, that was the thought. You know, that's going to have to be approved by IDOT, but that was going to be our concept and our plan moving forward was to, you know, give the landscaping that would be proposed there the best chance. And, you know, I think that's the plan we're going to move forward with.
That's all the questions I had.
Perfect, thank you. And
This
Mr.
is-
Moy, and I
can I ask a
apologize, I
question?
should have asked you at the beginning, but I know maybe we have record, but could you just let us state your name? Obviously, your name is Richard
Yeah.
Moy, but your address as well, for just
My
for the
address-
record.
3245 Sprucewood Lane.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Okay.
I will ask
Can I-
anybody
can I ask-
else
can I
on
ask you a
Teams that has a question.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is Imran Lajavrani. I'm actually Mr. Moy's neighbor as well, 3241 Sprucewood Lane. So similar concerns that Mr. Moy talked about, and I guess when Bridget, you mentioned about the landscaping and the trees that were going to get put on. Can somebody explain as far as I guess the route between the 5 foot or the 8 foot walkway or bike path or multi-path that we decide with the ditch and where the trees would go? What's the sequence of it? Is it the path, then the ditch where the storm water you guys are gonna fill up and put some barrier there, and then the trees they're gonna go up, or where would the pathway sit on that left, on the east or on the west east side of the Skokie Boulevard, closer to Sprucewood?
Joel, can you take this?
Yes. So I don't know if you can see, but the plan would be to have the roadway, the 5 feet, 5 to 7 feet or 8 feet, the path, and then there's quite a bit, not quite a bit, but there's some room to put some vegetation between the path and the existing fences that are there now.
All right. And so in the vegetation we're talking about, so IDOT took away our privacy in 2 days. All right. And I know we're talking about a plan of putting some vegetation. Is there, similar to what Mr. Moy asked, is what is the time frame of something that would grow to a point where the way we had privacy before, given the situation, and I don't know if you guys looked at the police reports of what Mr. Moy is talking about for last couple of years, there has been incidents of people peeking over the fence and especially talking about the fence area that's open towards the church today, because today there is no vegetation there, and the neighbor to the north or south of us have had issues where people have tipped over the fence because there's no vegetation or no shrubs there, and we're going to be in the same situation across the board. What is Village going to do for our safety?
Well, I wish I could say we could provide some immediate relief, but unfortunately projects like this are going to take some time, and especially this leg is contingent upon funding as well, receiving a grant. So the soonest that I believe the schedule showed construction is 2023. And then obviously, depending on the size of the initial landscaping, you'd see some growth that would be beneficial a few years after that. So I recognize we're probably, 3 to 5 years away before you could get some screening that would be meaningful to you on the Skokie side. I know in my prior correspondence with you, I encourage you to consider, if you can, to install landscaping on your side of the property, and then you could get some more immediate relief.
Yeah, and to that point, Bridget, we've done an estimate, isn't it, to put proper landscaping to provide the type of shade or type of support that IDOT took away from us. It's going to cost upwards of $15,000 just for one property of mine. So I mean, that's not reasonable. We can't go and spend 15 grand to put landscaping that was already there and was taken away from us by IDOT. So, I'm just trying to figure out, given the situation, we would like to get some sort of peace of mind and what could be done by the village to help us and not for wait for another 3-4 years here to figure it out.
Can I just ask, sorry, just a quick question, because you had said, I want to make sure I understand the timeline, because IDOT, the landscaping was removed this summer, but did you say that you've been having this issue for a couple of years, even with the landscaping that was there?
No, so the issue was with the neighbor that faces the church, where the landscaping was not. So that particular neighbor has had his fence jumped over a few times, and there's been police reports about that too. So I'm hoping somebody's checking up on that. Now, since the landscaping is removed, we're all exposed to the same scenario.
Got it.
Can I add to that?
Let me just make sure, sir, and I apologize, I now forgot your name, but I didn't write it down, but just want to make sure we addressed all of your questions and concerns before going back and opening it up.
Yeah, I mean, you heard my concerns. I haven't heard any responses back, so I guess, I think I'm done with my concerns, but I'm hoping there's some better responses back.
Yeah, and I think and Bridget, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is, obviously the initial just discussions with the trustees, but we're a couple of years away from moving forward with this, so a lot more is going to happen. And I think if I'm understanding what Bridget is saying is that any landscaping is going to be even a few extra years after that. So, but we'll take it into advisement. Mr. Moy, you said you had one more question?
Yeah, how from our fence to where the edge of the sidewalk would be is how much easement is there?
How much easement?
Yeah, between the east part of the sidewalk to our fence.
I believe there's about, let me look at the typical section. Jim, are you on? Do you know that offhand? I want to say it's at least 12 feet between there. Could be a little bit more.
Yeah, it's right around there, somewhere I would say between 10 and 15 feet.
The problem that I see right now is that because IDOT already removed the vegetation, is that we are getting more and more activity, regardless of whether you guys have a path or not. People are walking on that ditch, and we've had one person who was high on drugs or drunk, wherever, screaming over across the fence. And to be honest, now I've already spent thousands of dollars for security cameras, for additional landscaping and everything. And because of the fact that all the fence face the part where they can actually grab onto faces now Skokie Boulevard, they can easily just grab on and lift themselves right over the fence. This is only, we're not allowed to go build any beyond 6-foot fence. And that's a major concern we have right now. My wife, basically got really upset about it because not just our privacy, but the security has been compromised now. And right now, there seems to be no remedy in terms of what's going to be done next to reduce our safety here. And I can't understand why he was required to even cut it down right now, since this is still in proposal stage.
It's not my understanding that the village had anything to do with the removal of the trees. Is that right, Bridget?
That's correct.
It's not.
But the village was not considered. I mean, village did not consult to see this is going to expose people to safety concerns. I mean,
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe IDOT cares a whit what the village thinks, or even tells us when these things happen before they happen.
Dan, I think you might be able to jump in and provide some
Yeah, I mean, they notified us that there was some selective clearing that was to occur as part of this project. That's what IDOT calls it. They don't generally maintain vegetation in their right-of-ways, so when they do a project like this every 10 to 15 years, they take that opportunity to clear the right-of-ways. They let us know that they were going to remove dead, diseased, or invasive trees and shrubs as part of this project.
But did they give us any chance to weigh in on that decision, Dan?
They informed us of their decision, but they didn't say there was an option to not do the selective clearing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but also.
They said another way, they told us what they were gonna do.
Right,
Yeah,
they see
exactly.
these trees as a liability if they're dead and diseased or dying, that this is their chance to remove that liability, that these trees could fall onto the right of way with moving cars or on the private properties to damage the fence. And they wanted to take this opportunity to maintain the vegetation in the right of way.
Yeah.
There was also a safety concern at the intersection, so removing some of the trees that were blocking people's sight distance as they were turning out of Illinois Road was part of that decision.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, trimming down is two different things, and also, isn't the 5 feet beyond the fence on our side is owned by the property owners here? Like, if they're gonna go in that area and cut the trees out and cut the vegetation, shouldn't we be notified?
It's my understanding they did provide notice of the clearing. I know they had sent me a notification at the request of the village. We asked that they provide notification.
But the notification was just selective clearing,
Not the entire.
not the entire thing.
I think there was contact information on there if there's the need for more information. Yeah, there is an easement back there, but that's what I'm aware of.
So as I understand it, that easement that belongs to IDOT, it does not belong to the village. Is that correct? The difference between the curb and the fence is IDOT easement, or is it a village easement?
That I believe is IDOT easement.
Yeah, so there's very little, I'm sorry that this happened, but there's very little the village can do when they have no even easement interest in that property.
But I'm just trying to understand, to that point you just made, if I've been told that there is a 5 foot of area that is owned by property owners beyond the fence location where I'm paying taxes, how is that owned by IDOT?
Can somebody from the Civil Tech team comment on that, please?
So if it's a permanent easement, which I believe it is, they have the right, because there's like an agreement, or I can't remember exactly how it works, but IDOT really, as part of the easement, can selectively do basically whatever they want through there. And that's what we showed on as part of our research, was that there's an easement there on the other side of the fence that IDOT has that can go do either drainage improvements or, remove trees or pretty much whatever they want. That's I'd have to look up the actual verbiage of that easement, but that's essentially what that easement is there for.
Yeah, so I'm very sympathetic to the owners on Sprucewood, but their complaint is with IDOT. It's not with the village, because we don't control that land and we don't have rights there, and we don't have any jurisdiction to tell IDOT, what they can and cannot do.
But my question is, no, would they even bother if it wasn't for the consideration for this path?
Yes, they would bother, because it was my understanding they did it because they thought it was a liability to them.
And the folks with IDOT involved with this project didn't have knowledge of this potential project.
No, they wouldn't.
Since it was still in the conceptual phase.
But can I ask if we do move forward with this and we're granted this right, and the ability to do the landscaping, does that give us a little bit more control to put some landscaping up for the residents? Versus right now, we have no say in putting up any landscaping.
I take it we get into an intergovernmental agreement of some kind that would give us a right that we don't currently have.
Right.
Is
That's
that
correct. That's
Yeah,
correct,
so-
Trustee Kennedy. In fact, the village is acting on the residents' behalf at this point because we want to provide the best project possible, which includes some landscaping and screening. So we're going to facilitate that through a landscape design that IDOT would approve. But part of that negotiation would be, as Trustee Kennedy stated, an agreement that the village would likely have to maintain that landscaping.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
we,
So as
Ask
it
one-
stands now, Trustee Kennedy, let me just because you said it much better than I did, but as it stands right now, we don't have that and have limited options to help the residents. But if we move forward with this and come up with that agreement, then we have a little bit more flexibility.
I believe that's absolutely right, Trustee Solomon.
And
But
can I ask one more thing in here, since we have all the village trustees here that we're talking to, as we look for this plan, and I know the plan is going to be multi-year from now, or a few years from now, is there an opportunity to provide the safety with the owners that are at Sprucewood to go above the 6.5-foot fence that is currently in the zoning? And I know you guys will say, go talk to zoning, but if we're looking for kind of a solution across the board for people, then each individual house going to zoning and providing their case. Is there something village can do to provide us a blanket umbrella of a larger or taller fence on the Skokie side?
So Bridget or Dan, I'll let you answer. You both, I think, saw me smile because I was going to say exactly that. That's a land use and a zoning. I hate to answer in a municipal services, which I know is not the answer you were looking for, but
I would think, Trustee Sullivan, that the Judiciary Committee could come up with a change in the zoning code. It'd probably have to go through a multi-step process before that would happen, but give a permanent sort of permission to build a higher fence in this location.
yeah, and that's where I was going to say again, not commit, but just the experience. Given the hardship here, and it's a pretty reasonable hardship.
Correct.
I would think there's some solution there. And for some reason, I thought we allowed 8-foot fences.
I thought so too, actually.
The stockade fences on Skokie Boulevard, just west or just south of Lake Avenue.
And on certain other very busy streets. That's
Yeah.
correct.
So it's not the answer. I don't think this is the right committee to and make a decision, but I do think the residents of Sprucewood facing Skokie Boulevard have a case to say we need an exception. We need an exception here or a special code or something, whether it's judiciary or land use.
Correct.
Yeah, and the ask, I'm assuming what I'm asking is a help from village to kind of make it permanent rather than each individual household to go in front of the zoning committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that an action item your guys decide then?
That's not our jurisdiction in this committee. But I don't know why it couldn't be done through the proper processes.
I'll convey this conversation to Mr. Adler, who I know the resident has spoken with or communicated with, just so that we're all on the same page.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Moy, I still see your hand up. I'm not sure. Nope. There. Just put it down. Good use of the technology. Any other questions on Microsoft Teams? It's a good questions. I appreciate the debate here. I don't know who's manning any of the public comments or the YouTube live. Bridget, Dan, who would be? Anybody get anything? Did we receive anything?
Yes, we have a couple comments on YouTube Live from one individual, Lourdes Cornelius. Please consider at Skokie Road off-ramp signs to reduce speed. Constant fear of being rear-ended when turning right into Eden's Plaza, as well as scary for pedestrians waiting to cross street. All 4 corners of Skokie Boulevard and Lake Avenue, please consider no turn on red when pedestrians present. past children being hit by vehicles. Residents will be using the path. We would like to walk safely to the shops and spend money, thus bringing in sales revenue to the village. And that's it from YouTube Live.
Perfect. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll close public comment.
Trustee Sullivan, we did receive one email from Mrs. Moy. If I could just read that very quickly.
Sure. That'd be great.
Hi, Bridget. Thank you for the updates. I will not be able to join the meeting tonight, but I would like to provide our household opinion on the multi-use path. We, our household, are not in agreement of the plan for putting a sidewalk on Skokie Boulevard adjacent to Sprucewood as well for the following reasons. Too dangerous for the pedestrians as cars are speeding up to get in the highway. For potential fence jumping, we have had a situation already. To proven less trash through into our yards, we already experiencing this. We have already spent $3,000 to plant trees already, but still not good enough. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Leanne Moy, 3245 Sprucewood Lane.
Okay. Perfect. Anything further? Otherwise, I'll close it and we'll turn it back over to trustees and team to sort of debate on next steps. Going once. Okay, public comments closed. Bridget, Dan, anything, thoughts on direction here? Otherwise, I'll ask Trustee Kennedy or Kurzman. We can talk about sort of options, but where do you see us going from here? Where do you want us to go from here?
Yeah, our goal of having the discussion tonight is to seek the trustees' concurrence on one of the alignments so that we can proceed through the phase 1 process and eventually get design approval from IDOT and move into the design phase. So as we mentioned, alternative 1, which was the 8-foot path between the west side and the east side, was the preferred option based on the engineering analysis and the residents' comments that we've received to date. So given the impacts of the trees, however, we wanted to make sure that the committee was also in favor of that.
Okay. I guess it's back to the trustees. I'll lead it off and take sort of the hard position, and you guys can debate me. But look, I like alternative 1 or alternative 3. I think it'd be pretty. I'm not a big fan of alternative 2 for a few 2 and 4 for a few reasons. One, I think it's limited space on that side of Skokie Boulevard. And the other reason I like 1 and 3 is I do like a sidewalk up against Eden's Plaza. I think that would at least encourage people walking to and from or moving around a little bit better, especially given hopefully the current retail use there and hopefully an expanded use of retail, which will drive more traffic. Admittedly, I'm a little bit leaning towards alternative 3 over 1, only because, less trees, less right-of-way easements. I don't know how busy, the sidewalk will be. I mean, Trustee Kennedy asked a good question if it's going to be biking, and I'm not a cyclist, but I would think that's a pretty short. If you're a professional cyclist, you're not going to get much of a ride on that strip of sidewalk. I could be swayed on alternative 1, but for me, alternative 3 seems a little bit more reasonable. And I do respect what the residents on Sprucewood and the concern there that they have. And I think, given what I've learned tonight is this gives us a little bit more ability to help influence what's there. It's not a total protection for their property, and it's not the end solution. I think it's going to be a combination, but I think it gives us a little bit more flexibility to plant things that may help the process versus doing nothing right now. So that's my view.
So my view is that I agree entirely with Trustee Sullivan about having some say in what we do in this property, which we don't have at the moment, and that having this path here and entering into an intergovernmental agreement is definitely preferable. And I also think that this is an area in which we need something for walking and biking. I mean, because right now it's very, very difficult for anyone without a car coming from the east side to get to the Eden's Plaza, Westlake area, or even to Loyola. So I think it's a big improvement in that sense. I lean toward alternative one just because of the safety factor. I know that we don't know how many people, pedestrians, excuse me, versus bicyclists will use the path, but if there is any significant number of bicyclists on the path, I don't think that it's safe at 5 feet. So I would go with the wider path. I wish we knew more, but I don't know how you measure something before it even exists. So I don't know that there's a solution to that. But to be on the safe side, I would go with the wider path of alternative one.
So yeah, thank you. I appreciate your takes. I am similar of mind with options 1 and 3 being preferable. For me, that process is thinking about where students are coming from who are going to Marie Murphy, and they are coming from west of Skokie Boulevard. And so that would be only one crossing at Lake and Skokie, and I think that's preferable to crossing twice. So I'm also for the 8-foot path for similar reasons as Trustee Kennedy. And my thought on trying to understand what the future use will be is tough for so many of our issues that we're trying to address with infrastructure improvements to improve biking and walking. The challenge in particular in West Wilmette, where I live, is people aren't doing it because it's perceived unsafe. And so we are necessarily in a position of thinking of it perhaps as if you build it, they will come, or at least will have the option to come, whereas it wasn't an option before. And I would like to think that bicycles would be part of that mix. If you're coming from, in particular, west of the expressway to go to Marie Murphy, I think that would be a long walk, but a very doable bike ride, presuming that we can get the crossing of the Edens in a better place. So I like the opportunity of having bikes and pedestrians, and more than anything, I'm just excited at what we're doing. The pedestrian facilities report of 2015 set some things into motion in a different way than our active transportation plan, but it clearly identified this quadrant of the village as having some severe needs to become safer for its residents. And I feel like this is a key part of it here. I'm also hopeful that having the sidewalk will prevent people from needing to jump fences. I'm not saying I understand what is behind somebody jumping a fence, but I know that when my property abutted Glenview Road, my first home in Wilmette, we did have people hopping the fence. And it happens. But I think adding a sidewalk will actually reduce the possibility of that happening. So I agree with all the comments. I have empathy for what IDOT, for the residents about what IDOT did. And, I do think we have the best game plan possible moving forward with the ideas that trustees Kennedy and Sullivan brought up. I thought you guys were fantastic in coming up with some of that. So I'm with you on it. But those are my thoughts. I do prefer the 8-foot option, alternative one.
Perfect. And so, very good points, and I'll agree. So, Bridget, I think, you could have a unified municipal services coming up and recommending alternative one. I think the good news is we've all agreed that 1 and 3 were the right direction, and I think Trustee Kennedy and Trustee Kurzman have valid points. And on the let's make it wide enough and for all access and have that flexibility. And I do. I think I think the residents of Sprucewood, I feel I appreciate the comments, and I know it's frustrating, and unfortunately it's not going to be a quick solution, but it's going to take time. And I think we have it on record of we'll follow up with land use and Mr. Adler and or community development, Mr. Adler, to see what can be done in the interim and continue to work to come up with a solution here, or that hopefully will improve the area.
I think that's a great idea, Trustee Sullivan.
Yeah. So, Bridget, you're frozen or quiet. Are you stunned that we all agreed?
I'm delighted. I'm very happy. And we don't need a motion. Your concurrence is received, so we'll keep the committee informed as this project moves forward.
Yeah. No, I think it's exciting and some good work here. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun to see you all continue to work this in the right direction. Joel, very nice job.
Yes.
Thank you, trustees. Excuse me, I haven't talked for about 20 minutes. So yeah, I appreciate the thoughts and all the questions. And yeah, we just, not that my opinion matters, but I'm kind of excited too. I'm not a Wilmette resident, but I really like the fact that communities in our area, Chicagoland area, are putting biking and walking first. And it's really a cool feeling to know that, you know, I live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of sidewalks, and I wish we did have more along here. So, and bike paths and things for my kids. So it's really cool to see other communities doing that. So appreciate the thoughts, and we'll get this thing moving and get it done.
Yep. Perfect. And thank you all to the residents that spoke, or even those that attended. This is very helpful to all of us in the process. We do appreciate it. So anything further on this, Bridget, Dan?
Nope.
Perfect. Very good. Good discussion. So moving on to agenda 4, neighborhood storage project phase 2 negotiation update. I didn't ask Bridget. I'm assuming I'm turning that one over to you.
Yes, thank you. Just a very short update, since this was on the agenda, I think back in June for the committee. We did go through a negotiation with the phase 1 contractor, and it was I'm glad we went through the process. We believe they're a very good contractor, and in the end, though, the biggest unknown for us was the impact on COVID on the bid climate. And the only way to determine that is if you test the market. So we decided to go out to bid, and we're in that process actually starting today. The bid package was sent out to the company who manages our bids. And if all goes well, we should be in the position to award the next phase on December 22nd.
Great.
Any questions for Bridget?
I think it was a great decision, actually.
Yep, I would echo that. I commend you bringing that up. I know, it was all well intentioned, but as we said, if there was anything that you wanted to go a different path, and I think how you handled that was well done. So, and the good news is we stay on time.
Yep.
Right.
So, perfect. I guess I should ask any public comments on this. Any questions for those that are either attending on MS Teams or YouTube Live, or did we get any public comments? I'm trying to see. I thought I saw. No, we still have a few guests.
No comments on YouTube Live.
Okay. We'll give it just another 30 seconds. Otherwise, we'll move. I'll talk slowly since the rest is business. But actually, it's number 5 is public comment. So as I'm talking, you guys can watch and see if anybody has public comment. Item 6, I'm talking slowly. Old business. Any old business? Old business. Item 7, any new business? All right, I think sufficient time's gone by on public comment. I think it was very well done. So item 8 will be a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Trustee Kenny, second?
I'll second.
Do we have to, can I say a roll vote, or do we have to call that vote?
Unanimous is fine.
All right, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.